Cruise lines are burning through cash. Hey everyone, Dave K here today to talk about the cruise line industry. I'm going to speak to cruise line stocks and their future, citing you an article here, a Barron's article regarding the cruise industry, and it's really making me rethink and be concerned about those cruise line stocks that I have. Let's get to it here today. Cruise lines are burning through cash. Their survival depends on luring back customers post the current climate. That's what this article is about. That's the title of this article here, and I'm going to dive into it here today and tell you all about it. It's a Barron's article I found regarding the stock market and cruise line stocks, and I will include a link to the article in the description of this video as well. So if you're looking for that full article, make sure you scroll down and check that out. But before I dive into this article and give you my thoughts on cruise line stocks, I want to take this time to share a special message with you. Haven't shared this before. It is my Robinhood referral link. If you want to start investing in the stock market, the tool that I use is Robinhood. Now, you can choose which trading tool is best for you, but one of the many reasons I like Robinhood is because it's a free trading app, so you can buy and sell stocks on the stock market for absolutely free, and that's a fantastic resource. I've been using it for such a long time. I want to say over 3 years at this point. Now, they have come into some challenges lately with the tool being down for a certain period of time. There were a couple of articles about that, and it was down. People couldn't buy and sell for a while. I think it was a good couple of days at one point when the market was really crashing because they were receiving too much volume in trades, but I haven't really had any significant issues past that. The user interface is really nice, and so again, depending upon what you're looking for, plus if you use Robinhood here and use my link, you will get a free stock. It should work for everyone who clicks the link, if not the first several people who click the link. Link in the description below. Get a free stock from Robinhood, use my referral link there, and check out the app. Let me know what you think. And I get a free stock as well on that one. So I think that's for depending upon how many people sign up. We'll see. But thank you again for being a part of the fun with me, and thanks for your support. So this article starts off with a really interesting story about a 71-year-old retiree living in Florida who is willing to go on cruises after the current situation ends, but not in the way that a lot of cruise lines are hoping. So this individual is hoping to go on some of those river cruises or smaller cruises. Tells that story of how these retirees are more concerned about those larger ships being like petri dishes, where it's you're far more likely to get ill from those ships as opposed to the smaller ships. So they feel more comfortable getting on a smaller cruise ship, a river cruise ship, and taking one of those smaller cruises. But this also provides a challenge for the cruise line industry, where if a lot of people are thinking this way, it does provide some limitation in that they're growing a lot of their revenue and hoping to kind of build their businesses in the long term in terms of these larger ships. They accommodate much more people, and it's much more beneficial for them, I'm sure, in terms of the cost-benefit analysis, how much money they make per ship, since they have more rooms full and more paying customers, as opposed to how much they're paying on gas or on docking fees and other fees that you may experience when taking a cruise, regardless of the size of that ship. And I find that point very interesting. I think it's interesting to think about this concept of the smaller ships being less likely to pick something up, and that's just based on the sheer number of individuals who may be carrying something on that ship. I think that's a very interesting point and something I hadn't considered before, where I'm not sure if all of these cruise lines have that option where they can take river cruises in addition to these larger cruises, but if they do, again, there's a lot of potential there to say maybe these businesses will start to shift their lens and shift their model in that way, where if they can do enough smaller ship cruises, would that make up for that bigger ship volume? But I know those big ships can drive a lot of that revenue. That's where they're hoping to build a lot of that growth. And bigger ships are constantly being built, or were constantly being built. So we'll see how the future unfolds on that front. And that's a very interesting point that the writer of this article dives further into, saying not only do these cruise lines like Royal or Carnival or Norwegian need to bring back cruisers and lure in cruise customers to get on ships, but they also need to try to drive traffic to those larger ships where they have a lot more room availability, and I would envision they're driving a lot more revenue, a lot more profit per cruise. And so that presents kind of a two-sided challenge there for the cruise industry and for these cruise lines to drive. Now, the writer also dives into the fact that cruise industry has done this in the past, where there have been situations like the recession or other incidents that have occurred on cruise lines that have been challenges that some of the cruise industry and some of the cruise lines have had to overcome, but they have been able to overcome those challenges in the past. And so hopefully that gives them more sort of credibility to change those things and to improve on those things moving forward. Now, although there are bookings, many cruisers are booking cruises out in the future and saying, oh, let me see if I can book a cruise later this year or next year. That doesn't necessarily guarantee that that business is going to happen for those cruise lines. People can always cancel their cruises or request different types of compensation or refunds. I'm sure it depends on the cruise line and their policy, but it's difficult. This article is touching on how it's difficult for investors and individuals to predict the profits of these cruise lines in the future based on those bookings. It's really hard to tell how much revenue they'll be bringing in starting when and how much they'll be bringing in as a percentage compared to what they were bringing in before at a certain ramp rate. The writer believes that cruises will be docked maybe at least through mid-July, which I think is probably a fair analysis. The more I kind of think about it and crunch those numbers, I can see cruise lines opening up as one of the latest or one of the later businesses that starts operating again, especially here in the US, as we're thinking about going back out and being socially less distant and interacting with others again. I think cruise line is going to be one of those last activities that comes up, and that, again, it does make sense, but hopefully that will mean that things are prepared sufficiently for cruises to be as safe as possible. See, the writer also dives into possible solutions for cruise lines to make these ships safer and some adjustments they may need to make, accommodations that may be necessary for these cruise lines given the situation that we're in and the situation that we have experienced, that they may need to bring more medical staff or set up more medical venues on board on these cruise ships or make other adjustments in terms of cleanliness or wellness aboard the ships. And this is a capital expense that these cruise lines may have to cover even though they've taken on so much debt or lost so much profit during this current time. So are they going to be able to bring around that kind of money and drive that enough revenue to be able to build in those functions and make it worthwhile for them to continue to run those larger ships? I don't know, and these are scary points that this article brings up. And as I've touched on before, we already know that cruise lines are down big time in terms of the market. Airlines and cruise lines seem to be some of the biggest impacted. The article speaks to at least 65% down for cruise lines. I was seeing 75% down on some of these cruise lines, although they've come up from their bare minimums, from their lows, 52-week lows, where I want to say they've almost doubled those 52-week lows because of a significant scare at those point in times. They're still, again, down 60, 65, 70, even 75% of what those starting points were for before this whole situation went down, maybe mid-February. So who knows what the future will look like? And it seems like a lot of people are reducing their ratings for cruise lines in terms of both their credit ratings, in terms of giving them a lower score, not investment grade credit, and reducing their buy ratings to hold ratings. So these are just points that are kind of scary to keep in mind. That being said, there are still buy ratings for all of the cruise lines. So it's not all hopeless for the cruise lines ahead. We don't know what the future will look like in terms of their profits, but there are more points spoken to that I want to dive a little bit into here in this article. It sounds like upon interviewing some of these cruise lines, a Carnival spokesperson spoke to the extreme loyalty of some of their customers and people having pent-up demand for cruises, and I can see this being probable and likely, where I can feel like, at least myself right now, I'm really missing the opportunity to be able to travel right now. And perhaps it's just because we can't. And we feel like since we can't do something, we want to do it that much more. But that makes me want to go out and cruise or to travel that much more when the current situation ends. So that may drive significant traffic to these cruise lines. And I personally feel like if they've done everything to make sure that they've taken care of individuals, set up cleanliness and sorts of resources on these cruise ships to make sure that everyone is safe, I feel like I would feel fairly comfortable getting back on a cruise ship. But I can't know for sure when they'll open up or when I would feel personally comfortable getting back on the ships. So as much as I say I would feel comfortable getting back on cruise ships in the not so distant future, I'm not sure exactly when cruise ships will open back up or what precautions will be taken by what date, or where we'll be at on the curve for me to actually say this is the date that I would feel comfortable getting back on a cruise ship. So it does provide a little bit of concern or some hesitation for me in saying, how do I really feel about cruise stocks? As much as I say I want to cruise again, how long will it really be before I personally or others want to get back on a cruise? So this writer doesn't expect to see stocks earnings normalized on cruise line stocks until 2023. That's crazy to me. I feel like 2023 is a crazy long period of time to say cruise lines won't be back to their regular earnings. I can see all of this year, 2020, and even a good chunk of 2021 maybe impacted by earnings. I definitely think they'll be back open by 2021, but I think earnings maybe be impacted. But I'm expecting by the second half of 2021 for things to be in pretty good condition. I imagine even 2022, everything would be perfectly fine, and that you wouldn't see any issues in 2022 with earnings. Nonetheless, 2023. So that's a crazy thought for me to read that 2023 is when they're expecting to see normalized earnings on cruise stocks, but I can't know for sure. None of us can really know. So we'll have to see how things play out. And I'm also reading in this article that most cruise lines sounds like rake in a majority of their revenues, their highest revenues, in the third quarter of the year, Q3. So that would be July, August, September, which clearly they're not going to be able to do if there's a restriction at least until mid-July on these cruise line stocks. So it does kind of pose a limitation this year in terms of that revenue. But again, I'm kind of envisioning next year, mid-July, that these stocks will be fine. But I can't, again, none of us can know for sure. I'm not a professional investor. Don't take anything that I say here to be professional investment advice or buy or sell based on anything that I'm saying. But I would be kind of surprised to see a year from now, or a year from 3 months from now, a year and 3 months from now, that we were still seeing a lot of kind of impact of this and people aren't cruising as much. But again, you can't know. I don't know what the illness situation is going to look like. And I'm hopeful that things resolve in the long tail at a faster rate than that. But I'm just, again, can't know. And of course, once the cruise order or no cruise order is lifted, you have to bring back all of those employees, make sure all of those ships are fueled and cleaned and have everything that they need to hit the road again or hit the water to be sailing. So there's a lot of kind of restrictions or a lot of process in terms of that restriction being lifted, getting the bookings booked out, getting people on board, but also getting those ships up to where they need and the crew necessary on board. A lot of cruise employees, unfortunately, have been out of work during this time or are no longer able to work, whether they've been furloughed or whether they've been let go due to the situation. So we can only hope that everything comes back together sooner rather than later. This is very interesting to see as well. A UBS researcher wrote that although we may see some limited short cruises in the Caribbean before the end of the year, they're not expecting to see cruise operations returning, full cruise operations with larger ships returning until next year. Again, to me, that seems like a really long time to not see cruises operating until 2021 and not seeing that bottom line resolved until 2023 for cruise lines. Can't know for sure, but reading that article again from UBS, or this UBS researcher's note, is very frightening to see and much longer than I was anticipating to see that cruise lines would not be operating. But again, I don't know how things are going to play out. They're saying if the vaccine and testing comes around, then we can expect sooner, but otherwise not until 2021. Again, to me seems like a very long time, but I'm no expert when it comes to health. And so again, the question comes to, do these companies have enough money to ride out the storm in the longer term? Do they have enough liquid cash? Do they have enough in loans and in debt that they're taking on to be able to ride out the storm before these cruises are back operational and profitable? And we can only hope. We don't know how long it'll be. And there are estimates that it sounds like maybe Carnival has 9 months worth of money, revenue, set aside, or I'm not sure if it's revenue or if it's debt set aside to be able to put towards that time frame. But again, just hopeful how it plays out, and we'll see what happens. And these cruise lines are looking at crazy 11% interest rates, giving up equity stakes, and all kinds of very challenging financial deals to make just to keep themselves afloat and make sure they have the liquidity and the cash that they need to survive this time. So we'll see what the future looks like and how it unfolds on that, but definitely a scary time for a lot of these cruise lines, I'm sure. So in terms of my estimates at this point, I can't know, I'm no expert, but I'm thinking maybe we'll see some small cruises like those river cruises coming around, maybe in the third quarter of this year, around that September time frame, but it may even be later, and we may not see those big cruise ships come back. I'm hoping, again, fourth quarter of this year, around the October, November, December time, but maybe that's right. Maybe it won't be until next year, and it's worrisome, and I'd love to get back on a cruise, but it may be a lot longer than I'm anticipating, and I've got my fingers crossed that they come back okay, and when the time comes, we'll be able to get back on those cruise ships, and everyone will be healthier and safer for it. But it's a scary thought, and I'm not sure about the earnings. I'm no expert on that either, but I can hope they come around sooner than 2023. I'm thinking 2022, they should be back on level. I can't know for sure, but we'll see what the future looks like. What do you think? And of course, as that kind of final note on those cruise lines we've touched on, they are excluded from, they don't have access to that U.S. government support and security, in the sense they can't bring in that money that the government is offering as loans or as equity stakes, because they're not founded, they're not based in the United States. So another challenge there to cruise line stocks. We'll have to see how the future unfolds for them, but definitely a lot of very scary data on this article that makes me concerned about these cruise line stocks as a whole, when cruise lines will be operational again, and even makes me think about when I'll be getting back on a cruise. So we'll have to see how the future looks when we get more information and as the days and the weeks and the months progress here. What do you think of this situation? Do you think that there is a lot of scary information in this article? Do you think that I'm kind of aligned, or that I'm accurate when it comes to it's going to be longer than I was initially anticipating, but maybe not as long as 2023 to see that real comeback, or next year to see us get back on cruises? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you haven't already, consider hitting that subscribe button and ringing the bell to stay informed of future adventures. And until next time, play on. And I will include the description of the article in the description below as well. And also reducing their buy ratings to hold ratings, or that's